In the United States, a country celebrated around the globe for innovation, opportunity, and the promise of upward mobility, there lies a less visible undercurrent, a reality shaped by widening divisions, systemic injustices, and persistent inequalities that many Americans live with every day, but which seldom make the headlines. One of the starkest indicators of this divide is wealth distribution. As of early 2025, nearly two-thirds of the country's total wealth is held by the richest 10% of households, while the bottom half together control only about 2.5% of that wealth. Despite the narrative of opportunity and pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, this data suggests that for a large fraction of Americans, the economic deck may already be stacked against them from birth. Income inequality has deepened too. The Gini coefficient, a standard measure of income inequality, recently stood around 0.47 in the U.S., a significant rise from roughly 0.43 in 1990. Over decades, wages for many working-class families have stagnated or failed to keep pace with rising costs of housing, health care, education, and childcare. Meanwhile, housing costs have soared, medical bills climb, and higher education leaves many burdened by student loan debt, creating a middle-class squeeze for those earning enough to seem comfortable on paper, but not enough to feel secure. For these individuals, the classic version of the American dream, home ownership, stable job, secure retirement, feels increasingly elusive. Then there's the undercurrent of systemic injustice tied to race, wealth, and the criminal justice system. The U.S. continues to incarcerate more people than almost any other developed nation proportionally. According to the latest data, 2023, the total number of people held in state or federal prisons reached about 1,254,200 at year-end, reflecting a 2% increase from the previous year. If we include local jails, juvenile facilities, immigration detention, and other correctional settings, the total number of Americans touched by incarceration, either directly or indirectly through family ties, is far larger. The human impact is not just numbers. Families are torn apart, communities are destabilized, generations inherit the consequences of criminal records, even when crimes were nonviolent or stemmed from lack of opportunity. Critics argue that the prison system, rather than rehabilitating people, often perpetuates cycles of poverty, discrimination, and marginalization, especially among communities of color and underprivileged socioeconomic backgrounds. Layered on top of economic inequality and mass incarceration is the ongoing prevalence of substance abuse, especially opioids, and the failures of public health and social safety nets. Studies of U.S. jails found that fewer than half offer medications for opioid use disorder, and only about 13% make these treatments available to all who need them. This gap is critical because many people entering the criminal justice system struggle with addiction, yet the infrastructure for treatment is often absent, leading to cycles of overdoses, relapse, and reincarceration. Experts in public health call this a missed opportunity for intervention, noting that post-incarceration overdoses are a leading cause of death among formerly incarcerated individuals. Meanwhile, for many working and low-income Americans, access to quality health care remains precarious. Insurance is often dependent on employment, and those outside stable full-time jobs, gig workers, part-timers, or those in unstable industries, may end up uninsured or underinsured. Facing high out-of-pocket costs for medical care, many delay or forego treatment. This contributes to unresolved chronic conditions, mental health decline, and financial ruin for families already juggling tight budgets. The stress of economic instability, social marginalization, health uncertainty, and tenuous safety nets is compounded by a growing mental health crisis. Though public awareness about anxiety, depression, and loneliness has increased over recent years, resources remain unevenly distributed. Mental health care is often expensive, stigmatized, or inadequate, especially in underprivileged or rural areas. These pressures, in turn, feed into social problems, family breakdown, substance abuse, crime, homelessness, and chronic despair. Add to this the rising burden of public safety challenges, particularly gun violence, mass shootings, and neighborhood crime in some cities, which for many Americans erode the sense of security that is often taken for granted. Civic trust fractures. Communities fear more than they hope. The sense of belonging that underpins social cohesion weakens in places where systemic neglect and structural inequality dominate everyday life. Yet, amidst all this, stark inequality, institutional failings, crime, addiction, instability, there are stories of resilience, resistance, and hope. Grassroots activists, community organizers, reform advocates, and everyday citizens are working to reclaim justice, demand accountability, and rebuild systems from the ground up. Criminal justice reform movements push for decarceration. Community clinics extend health care to uninsured families. Mental health advocates mobilize to break stigma and provide outreach. Housing rights groups fight rising rents and displacement. And environmental justice campaigns challenge the unfair burden of pollution and disasters on the poorest neighborhoods. In many ways, understanding the darker contours of America is not about painting a bleak portrait of a single nation, but about acknowledging that what is often portrayed as a land of uniform prosperity is in fact layered with contradictions. For millions, the American promise remains aspirational. For some, it feels like a fading ideal. But in facing these truths openly, economic inequality, systemic injustice, public health failings, and social fragmentation lies a potential for renewed purpose, reform, and real solidarity. And in that possibility, there remains a chance for a fairer, more equitable America yet to be built.